I wonder if you had the chance to look at the book I
Yeah,
sent you.
absolutely. I
Okay.
got it right here. Yes.
Okay, great.
I'm very, very excited. It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
Thank you. Thank you for
So,
having me.
yeah, absolutely. So, the one thing about Gen Z 360, I really love the way you laid this out. I love the way that just it flow. You know what it reminds me of? I come from Generation X. So, I remember Douglas Copeland's book. And
Okay.
I remember how that used to be kind of the guidebook to Gen X. And when I was reading it, how much of that rang true and how much of what I understand about Gen Z rings true. It's really good. How did the idea for this book begin and how did it come to fruition where I'm holding it in my hands now?
Okay. So I've been a management consultant for many years and I worked with large corporations. And since year 2000, I noticed that companies had huge difficulty to adjust for the shift and the change that came with the millennials.
Yeah.
And it was not something that companies recognized immediately. And it took a long time and huge amount of trial and errors, almost in every dimension, in how to handle them as employees, how to sell and market to them. And even in 2018, I sat in a meeting with a client, a very large global corporation, and they were talking about how difficult it is with the millennials. And at that moment, I had this really, it was an aha moment for me that I realized the older millennial at that point was 38 years old. And we are going to have a new generation coming, Gen Z, and we have not yet got our heads around these previous generations. What's going to happen now? Are we going to repeat all the mistakes? Are we going to have a good integration? Are we going to go through again through this upheaval of adjusting yet for another generation? And that's when I thought, it would be really interesting to have a service around that. That's my company, Gen Z Planet. That's what I do. But I wanted to start with doing this massive research to actually understand who they are and what they stand for, how they're going to affect the workplace, how they're going to affect commerce, how they affect the culture. And that's how the book came about.
I read something the other day that said that all of the Gen Z, the young generations now, are hitting midlife crises in their 20s.
Well, I would say I would not equate that. I don't think it's equivalent. I think there are other things that's really happening
Sure.
with Gen Z. One of the big challenge, and I would say even a crisis, is what has been spoken about a lot in the last few years, which is the mental health
Yeah.
challenge. And that is something that I think we should pay attention to as parents, as society, as employers, because that's going to affect everything that we are surrounded by. And it could be something that reflects itself, in studies that coming up from the CDC, like 40% of Gen Z feel lonely and hopeless. This is very disturbing statistic. To even more disturbing statistic of, youth suicide reaching a height. Thankfully, because of a lot of talks about it and a lot of programs that put in place, we saw for the first time last year that there is a slight improvement on some of these metrics, but it's still, in my opinion, there's a long way to go.
And the only reason why I bring up that stat is because I think about generations and what we've gone through. Being in Generation X, I remember seeing my parents and previous generations really dealing with war. Like there was serious, massive things that were going on. And then we come around and nothing really is huge. I mean, there's little episodic moments like the Challenger explosion in 86, the attempted assassination attempt at Ronald Reagan, things like that. And then 9/11 happens. And then it's like, okay, this is the moment for this generation. Then we're going to go to war and all of these things. But I see these kids now, the younger generations, they have everything at their disposal. Whatever they want to see, whatever they want to get immersed with, there's a way that they can find it on YouTube or on the internet. And then they have
Mhm.
to go through the pandemic. I mean, there's been some heavy stuff that have swayed, and that's affected the workforce. I mean, that was the thing that surprised me about COVID. So many help wanted signs came up. And it wasn't about unemployment, it was about people hitting that proverbial crossroads of their lives.
Yes, and there are a couple of things I would like to say about that. First of all, you are very right to say that previous generations had, you know, in essence, the way we define generation is basically people who grow up at the same time at the same place and have shared experiences that defined who they are and their values. So if you think about the baby boomers, we are talking about the Vietnam War, we are talking about, there are like two or three events, like you say, Gen X. There was the Berlin Wall, there was the big financial crisis. For millennials, it was 9/11. When you think about Gen Z, the event that they've been exposed to since 1998, which is the first year that they were born, it's immense. They had to go through, three very contentious presidential elections. They experienced some events that were very defining and very influencing what we talked before, the level of anxiety, which are the school shooting and violence. The exposure that they have to social media is another source of influence. So if you think about it, there is a very long list of events that you could say define this generation, including the global pandemic, and of course being the kids of the global recession.
Yeah.
So all these things together really affect the psyche. And what you see is, on one hand, you can say, no surprise they have these challenges, but at the same time, if you think about it, they got used to the fact, they almost internalized the notion that change is the only constant,
Yeah.
and they learn to live with it. And part of living with it is, you could argue they have more resilience than other generations. But at the same time, some of the issues that we are talking about, of 4 out of 10 are feeling hopeless and lonely, is part of what they observe and what they experience.
So let's peel back the layers of exactly what you do on a daily basis. And to do that, I want to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids. It's career day. And the kid in the back of the room is like, hey, what do you do for a living? How do you answer him?
So what I do is I run a small firm that helps companies to understand who Gen Z are and to better engage with them, both as employees and as consumers. And the way it takes shape or form, it could be like advisories. So to give an example, I worked with a very interesting company that came to the United States from abroad. They are making natural product, it's milk replacement. So it's non-dairy products. And they wanted to enter the United States. And one of their target audience, because they're all about sustainability and wellness and health, they wanted to come to the United States and target specifically Gen Z. So I helped them to think through who is this generation, how you message this generation, etc. And then I do a lot of speaking engagement. I work with companies who do a day off and they want to have executive workshops. So I go and work with them on the specific topic of Gen Z.
So, what did you want to be when you were in grade school? What was your ultimate dream life?
So that's a very interesting question. When I was very young, I wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
And And then I tried to get to medical school and I was not successful. While I was waiting for another chance to get into medical school, I happened to go and I thought this is going to be temporary. I'm going to join a company that was looking for a marketing assistant.
Yeah.
And then I got the marketing bug and I realized that actually I like business and I like to be in business. And I like what it entailed to do marketing and sell and develop products. And then that's basically what took me into that path. I went to business school. And after business school, I worked for 3 years as a marketing director in Europe for a technology company. And at one point, I was headhunted by a consulting firm. And that's how I basically started my consulting career, which lasted about 20 years. During that period, my focus was consumer goods and retail and understanding consumers and understanding behaviors and helping company to change their organization. So that was how my career evolved. And then a few years ago, I decided to go solo and do what I'm doing right now, completely dedicating to this my work for the next generation and making sure that they can better integrate in society and in business.
Yeah. So take me back to your beginnings. Where were you born and raised? What were the foundational seeds of business and helping the next generation that were planted into you that eventually became your career that you have now?
It's an interesting question. I think one major thing is that my father was a business owner. He always owned the small businesses, and I guess I got that interest in business from him.
Yeah.
And when I decided to go into business, I think we in consulting, the things I liked the most was one thing was to work with clients, be with people, and help people to solve big problems. So I think it's the problem solving aspect of the job that was really appealing to me. While other thing that I really enjoyed is researching consumers and consumer behaviors because identifying insight and connecting dots. And I think that's something that was in me from a very early age.
So who's been a hero for you? Who's been that inspirational force for you to do this work that you've been doing?
I don't know if I had an inspirational hero for this particular walk.
Yeah.
I think I was more inspired by two things. One is what I've seen happening with millennials and getting to that conclusion that we can't afford repeating the mistakes of the past and we have to do something completely different with Gen Z. And I think the other thing I would say is Gen Z themselves. They are, to an extent, my heroes. It's not one individual person. When I started to do my research and I started to meet more and more Gen Zers, either in focus groups, in interviews, I was so impressed by them, by the fact that they are truly different. And there are good aspects to that, and there are negative aspects to that, but they are true different. They are truly a different generation. And I thought I would like to spend my time knowing them more and helping companies who are really struggling to understand them to do something different.
So what generation are you technically in?
Generation X.
Okay, so we're Xers here. So what have you learned from being in Generation X? Because from my recollection of everything that I remember from that Douglas Copeland book was that we were the first ones that kind of put, you know, like being happy in our career and traveling and not putting this big emphasis on title and money is a big deal. I mean, there was a lot of things that went into it. So, with that said, what have you learned from being a Gen Xer that has given you empathy to help Gen Z, to help the next generation?
I'm not sure if it's a generational things,
Sure.
but for me, being a Gen Xer, I recognize that I grew up in a world that was much simpler, that we had probably, different kind of world that was in a way in more simplified, more, maybe even more safe. And I many times have conversation and I said, would like to be a Gen Z right now? And sometimes I hesitate, because I I feel like they've been growing up in a very complex world, exposed to so many things, mostly because of technology and and the phones and everything is changing so rapidly. I think we had more stability
Yeah.
as Gen Xer, and I guess that's the source of my empathy and reason to why I would like to be of help
Yeah.
in this for this generation.
I think the thing that's interesting to me is I have a stepdaughter that's 20 and a son or 19 and my son's 20 is that
Uh-huh.
we come from a generation where we've seen this massive bridge from pre-technology, pre-internet modems
Mhm.
to this explosion of everything, video phone calls and AI and all of this stuff. We're at a
Mhm.
weird position here where a lot of generations don't understand that. And we tend to be more adept at both sides of it. We can use a rotary phone or we can
Mhm.
do a FaceTime call like that,
Yeah.
right? Where the
Yes.
previous generations are like, oh, it's too advanced. I don't want to get involved with that. I don't want to do
Yes.
technology. And if you put a rotary phone in front of a kid now that's Gen Z, they're going to be like, what spaceship dropped that out of a hatch, right?
They don't
So
know what it is.
yeah, they have no idea what it is. So it's very interesting. I think, and my point of saying this is that I think it's very instrumental that you come from this generation to be a voice of understanding both worlds. Do you feel like you're in kind of a good generational place to help them?
I am because, my entire career, I actually worked with both baby boomers and millennials. So I actually witnessed the transition to millennials. So I do understand both worlds, and I feel like I can be a bridge if, to this upcoming generation.
The thing about the new generation is, and I think it's like with anything, with technology and other things, is that it grows and expands so much. Like I'll hear my kids talking about things. Like the other day, for instance, my son's a big basketball fan. And Steph Curry was at a press conference and he was saying things that I knew was AI. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. That's not real. It's weird how much is going on now that we didn't deal with. So my
Yeah.
question to you is, how much do you work on keeping up with what's going on with the younger generations so you stay ahead of it and help them deal with it from your wisdom and your perspective?
Very, very much so. One is I constantly speak to Gen Zers, either through focus groups, through surveys. So I get to see the sentiments, what's going on. We just kind of finalized a study that is going to come up very soon about Gen Z and money, and very interesting points coming up there as well, especially the level of entrepreneurship that this generation has. So yeah, I do a lot to keep up with what's going on, the technologies, the platforms, the new social media, new who is downloaded the most, etc., etc.
What's been the best response you've gotten from your book, whether it's a fan letter or a review? What was the one that kind of hit you and it was surprising?
I would say that one of the most surprising review that I got was from someone that says this is a must-read book for every parent. And I did not intend my book to target parents. It was a business book that targets marketing people and HR people and, general knowledge about Gen Z. I didn't think that if people would say, oh, this is a must read for every parent.
Yeah. What was your favorite book growing up? What was the one that made you either want to write or read more?
100 Years of Solitude.
Oh yeah. I had to start that a few times. That was heavy. That was a very heavy book.
It was a fantastic book
Yeah.
because there is so much fantastic thinking that
Yeah.
went into it, and the story and the complexity. And it's also, funnily enough, I never thought about it, but now that I'm saying it, it's about generations.
Yeah. Certainly.
And
It
and
was
yeah,
such a wide generational swath what happened in that. Very, very
yeah,
much so.
yeah.
So, are you hopeful? We're in a new year somewhat in 2025. We have this new administration. There's new fears. There's a lot of uncertainty going on. And of
Mhm,
course, a lot of this is going to be shouldered on the young generations. Us that have
mhm,
been around for long enough look at the younger generations and think, wow, I want to give you a better world. And there's a
mhm.
lot of things that are very worrying right now. So my question to you is, are you hopeful for this generation to get over what we're living through and create a more ideal world for the future?
I do, and I think that it will take time for that to manifest itself. I think as a generation, they have a lot of challenges. We spoke about, one of them, which is the challenge of mental health and the technology and its negative aspect, etc. They have a lot of things to deal with, but at the same time, I see a very high degree of entrepreneurship, of willingness to do something different, to question. And I think my advice always for, especially, like in the context of work, that say people say, oh, they don't want to adjust, they don't want to do things the way we do it. And I always ask, have you ever stopped thinking for a second and ask yourself, what if they are right? What if we consider that the way we've been doing things for 50 years could actually done better or different? And let them bring that thinking and ideas and new ideas and make them part of the process and the solutions. So I think if we adapt that thinking, I believe that they will feel more welcome in a workplace, in a society, and they will, grow into what we would like them to see. In the end of the day, they are the leaders of the future. And I don't think that there is any leaders that emerged so far, but we already see few of them in Congress. We see some of them, starting companies. I think they're going to be very different from what we see, the leadership that we saw from millennials. But I am hopeful.
I think you hit on something very important too. I think the entrepreneurship part's huge. They are getting it. They can charter their own worlds. They can be YouTube influencers. They can do TikTok marketplace. They can be nomads and do work from anywhere because we've learned that from the pandemic and Zoom world we're in. And I think the Gen Xers started that break from this corporate methodology, this notion of how you're supposed to live your life. Have a steady paycheck, have reliable health insurance, all of those things. And they're kind of going out there and creating this reality. And I think you're totally onto it. I think they're going to be the ones that are going to create a future that it's going to be more reliant on them instead of these invisible entities that are up in skyscrapers.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of that happening. One of the interesting finding of the study that is going to come in a few days is that 46% of our sample, which was statistically significant, we surveyed 1,000 people, say that they have a side hustle.
Yeah.
And by definition, side hustle is something that is income generating that you do in addition to your full-time or part-time job or in addition to being in school.
Yeah.
When you slice the data to the people who are in school, the number is like 30%. So 30% of high school kids, 16 and above, or college kids have side hustles. And that means that, they are selling things on the internet, either buying things and selling things or selling used stuff on the internet. They are, as you say, content creators. They're doing social media work for people. They're giving web design services, you name it. They do Uber and DoorDash deliveries and so on and so forth. And you could see that there is a willingness to do more than just, okay, this is what I'm doing. And there is also a desire to eventually be independent
Yeah.
and own a business.
So is the mind behind Gen Z 360 in reality and in book, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, everyone that you do business with or gets your book, but you run the show. What's your
Mhm.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Myself,
Yeah,
I'm a person who wants to contribute my thinking, my ideas to create a better place.
I love it. So, if anyone wants to pick up this wonderful book, or if they have any questions, they want to learn more about your business, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
www.genzplanet.com.
Okay. Wonderful.
and and the book is available on Amazon.
Okay. I will provide all of that in the show notes. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your story. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Joe. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you.